Let's talk about battle for control over the United States Senate. Republicans hold a 53-47 majority. I know that says 45 because there are 45 elected Democrats and there are 2 independents who caucus with the Democrats. In order to take control of the Senate chamber, Democrats would have to overcome this number. So they'd have to win a net gain of 4 seats, which means they can lose 1 and hold 5, or defend all of theirs and flip 4, or hell, they could lose 2 and flip 6. So here's our map of how this looks. These are the Senate battleground states, right? Starting with Minnesota, which is likely Democrat, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Georgia, which are lean Democrat, Maine and Michigan, which are toss-ups right now, Ohio, Texas, Alaska, and Iowa, which lean Republican, Nebraska, Montana, and Florida, which are likely Republican. But these are all possibly in play. Democrats need to flip the ones looking like Democrats' absolute best chance right now, and that is actually North Carolina. It's a Republican state, but it's leaning Democrat like right now.
Hey guys, Dr. John is here. So what just happened? North Carolina's Senate race has been upended as Democratic candidate Roy Cooper connects with voters on the crushing cost of living, a message resonating far deeper than strategists expected. The shift has sent shockwaves through both parties, forcing a political realignment in a state that was widely considered safe territory. Cooper has been traveling across the state on what he calls his Make Stuff Cost Less tour, and the stories he's hearing are heartbreaking. Ordinary families are making impossible choices between buying groceries and paying utility bills. Parents are wondering how they'll afford childcare so they can keep working. And healthcare costs? They've become so astronomical that people are literally putting off necessary medical treatments because they simply cannot afford them.
Largely to do with the strength of the Democratic nominee, Roy Cooper. The former 2-term governor of the state comes with a penchant for winning elections. Since he was elected to the North Carolina House of Representatives in 1986, he's not lost a single election in 40 years. Now, he's facing off against the former Republican National Committee chairman, Michael Whatley. Let's look at a broad look at what the polling is looking like in this state. We are not putting individual poll numbers on here because it's still early in the race, and Cooper enjoys high name ID, so it's not surprising that he's ahead. He was a governor, he was the attorney general. Plus, there are a lot of undecideds in these polls, many of whom may end up voting Republican. But in polling over the last few months, as you can see, these are the dates going back all the way to March, Cooper is in the lead, and individually these polls may not mean much, but taken together, they give you some sense of how the race is shaping up. The only true poll, however, is the one on November the 3rd.
Now here's where this gets really interesting. You need to understand the history of North Carolina Senate races to grasp just how significant this moment really is. For nearly 4 decades, this state has elected only 2 Democrats to the United States Senate. That's not a typo. In almost 40 years, North Carolina has sent just 2 Democrats to Washington. The last one was in 2008, the same year Barack Obama carried the state. But here's the pattern that's been haunting Democrats for years. They've had strong candidates who would poll ahead, sometimes way ahead, only to watch their leads evaporate as Election Day approached. They were winning in the polls until they weren't, and that's a bitter pill to swallow. But something feels different this time. Cooper has been remarkably consistent in his messaging, and he's building a coalition that might just break that decades-old curse.
Joining me now is Roy Cooper. He's the former governor of North Carolina. He's the Democrats' best chance to flip the United States Senate. Governor, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Ali. Glad to be with you.
As I said, the numbers, we can dwell in the numbers for a while, unimportant to you because you have got to win independent and moderate voters, and some Republicans, by the way, which you have done in all of your recent elections, right? You have run in elections where Donald Trump has won, where statewide other Republicans have won, and you've won. So you've got some way of doing it, but you're also running in perhaps the most polarized election that you've seen yet.
Well, what you see now is that people know that their paychecks are not keeping up with the cost of living right now. That's why I've been on my Make Stuff Cost Less tour across North Carolina, hearing from people about how much it's costing them just to live. But when you're looking at polling and you're looking at United States Senate races in North Carolina, you have to look at our history. In almost 40 years, we've only elected 2 Democrats in North Carolina to the United States Senate. Our last one was 2008. And in that year, North Carolina went for Barack Obama.
What's fascinating is that he's not just relying on traditional Democratic voters. He's speaking directly to working-class families across the political spectrum, and his message is cutting through the noise in ways that have Republicans genuinely concerned. Here's the fascinating part that everyone needs to understand. When you dig into the polling data, most North Carolinians actually know Roy Cooper. They've seen him govern. They've watched him handle crises. They know what kind of leader he is. The same cannot be said for his opponent, Michael Whatley. There's a significant name recognition gap, and that's a problem for the Republican campaign because voters tend to stick with what they know when they're uncertain. But Cooper isn't taking anything for granted, and that's a crucial point. He told reporters something that should send chills down the spine of anyone who wants to see the Senate flip.
And the pattern that we've seen in the past is that the Democrat, and we've had some great ones running, but they've been ahead until they weren't. And looking at that polling, a lot of people do know me, and they don't know my opponent, and I don't have more than 50% in most of those polls. So we want people asked me the other day what was my biggest fear, and I said is that people take this race for granted. If we don't win North Carolina, we are not going to flip the Senate. We have to flip the Senate right now. These are not ordinary times, and I want people to help us out. You can go to roycooper.com. We're working on our end of quarter fundraising deadline now because we know that the other side is going to have hundreds of millions of dollars with these outside PACs. We've got two of them right now that have already said they're going to spend almost $100 million in the last 12 weeks of this campaign to try to keep us from flipping this seat. We cannot let that happen. We have to win.
He said his biggest fear is that people will take this race for granted, that they'll assume it's in the bag and stay home on Election Day. That scenario would be catastrophic because if Democrats can't win North Carolina, they cannot flip the Senate. It's mathematically impossible. The math simply doesn't work any other way. The stakes could not be higher right now. We're living through extraordinary times. The chaos in Washington is unprecedented. The upheaval in our government institutions is unlike anything we've seen in modern American history. And Cooper is making the case that he's the right person to bring some stability and common sense to the nation's capital. But here's the financial reality check that nobody can ignore. The Republicans are preparing to unleash a tidal wave of outside spending in North Carolina. Two major outside groups have already announced they're planning to dump nearly $100 million into this race.
If you ask 10 people on the street anywhere here in New York or where you are in North Carolina, what the most important issues are facing them come November, you probably get 12 answers out of 10 people. But you've really leaned into affordability, which, by the way, Donald Trump did in 2024, and he won. And Zohran Mamdani did in 2025, and he won. People start to get worried that the politician speaks about affordability, and then you elect them, and somehow your prices go up. What's the argument you're using in North Carolina about the influence that you can use and the experience you have that actually will affect people around things that matter to them?
Well, this administration promised that this would be the day one job to lower costs for people. And not only have they not done that, they've made it a lot worse. And my opponent, Michael Whatley, was a cheerleader for the one big, beautiful bill that ripped away health care from so many North Carolinians. And we haven't seen it all yet because the Medicaid cuts are going to occur
in just the final 12 weeks. That's not a small sum. That's the kind of money that can flood the airwaves, distort the truth, and convince voters to go in the opposite direction of their actual interests. Cooper's team is working frantically to raise enough money to compete. They've got a crucial fundraising deadline approaching, and they're urging supporters to contribute whatever they can. The disparity in spending could be decisive, and everyone involved in the campaign knows it. They're hoping that grassroots energy and enthusiasm can offset the Republican financial advantage, but they're under no illusions about the scale of the challenge they're facing. The irony here is almost too perfect to ignore. The Trump administration came into power promising that day one would be about lowering costs for the American people. They campaigned on it relentlessly. They made it their central promise. And what happened instead? Costs went up, healthcare got more expensive, groceries increased, utilities skyrocketed. And then there were the tariffs, which have hit North Carolina farmers particularly hard. One farmer in Wilson County is now paying 20% more for fertilizer and equipment. That's not just an inconvenience, that's a threat to his very livelihood. Michael Whatley, Cooper's opponent, was apparently a cheerleader for all of this. He supported policies that ripped away health care from countless North Carolinians. He praised the administration's approach, even as families were being crushed by the resulting inflation. The Medicaid cuts that are coming will hit the state's newly expanded health care coverage, which now covers 725,000 more people. That's not a small number. That's nearly 750,000 people who could lose their insurance if Whatley and his allies get their way. Senator Tom Tillis, the current Republican senator from North Carolina, actually stood up against that disastrous health care bill. He said he didn't know what he would tell his constituents if he voted for it. But Whatley was all in, cheering from the sidelines while families were about to be devastated. That's not just bad policy. That's a fundamental betrayal of the people these politicians are supposed to represent. What's particularly striking is the way Cooper is framing the contrast. He's not just talking about policy differences. He's making a moral argument about whose side these politicians are really on. The Trump administration and its allies, he argues, don't care about working people. They care about corporations and billionaires. They care about protecting the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. And the evidence for that argument is piling up every single day. The Supreme Court decisions that dropped today have added an entirely new dimension to this North Carolina race, and the implications are staggering. For the most part, the court's rulings went against Donald Trump. There was one decision that favored him, but the rest were losses that could have significant political consequences. And Cooper, who practiced law for 18 years before entering politics, understands exactly what's at stake here. This is where we need to talk about something that goes to the very heart of American democracy. We used to count on one branch of government to stand up for the rights of Americans. The courts were supposed to be the umpires who called balls and strikes fairly without fear or favor. But that trust has been severely eroded. A lot of Americans simply don't believe this Supreme Court is doing its job. They see it as another weapon in the political arsenal rather than an independent arbiter of justice. Cooper's analysis of the court's rulings is particularly sharp. He's argued that we need to restore the balance of power that the framers of the Constitution intended. The whole structure of American government was designed to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. But today, with a president who seems to believe he can do whatever he wants, and a Supreme Court that's increasingly willing to go along with him, that balance is under serious threat. The court's ruling on regulatory bodies was especially concerning to Cooper. When you give the executive branch the power to fire people at regulatory agencies at will, something fundamental changes. These agencies oversee everything from consumer protections to financial regulations to product safety. They're supposed to be independent arbiters who can judge cases fairly. But when everyone knows they can be fired at any moment if they rule against the administration's interests, what kind of decision-making are we going to get? You don't need to be a genius to figure that out. Here's a way to think about it that makes the problem crystal clear. Imagine you're at a baseball game, and the umpire knows that one team can get him fired if he makes calls against them. Is that umpire going to be able to call the game fairly? Of course not. He's going to be looking over his shoulder, worried about his job security, and he's going to make decisions that keep the powerful happy rather than decisions that are actually correct. That's essentially what's happening with these regulatory agencies now. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Product Safety Commission. These are all entities that were created to protect everyday people from corporate abuse. They've been responsible for some of the most important consumer protections in American history. But if their leaders know they can be fired for doing their jobs properly, they're going to start siding with corporate interests instead of protecting ordinary Americans. This isn't some abstract legal theory. This is going to have real consequences for real people. When the Federal Trade Commission gets scared to take on predatory lending practices, it's families who get hurt. When the Consumer Product Safety Commission is afraid to issue tough recalls on dangerous products, it's children and elderly people who suffer. When the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is intimidated into backing off from investigating banks, it's working families who get crushed by unfair fees and deceptive practices. The rulings that came down today represent decades of precedent being overturned in a single day. It's the kind of radical change that would normally take years of careful legal evolution, but it's happening all at once. And the only people who are going to benefit are the powerful and the well-connected who can use their influence to get favorable treatment from regulatory agencies that are now too scared to stand up to them. Cooper is making this a central part of his campaign because he understands how deeply it affects the people of North Carolina. The state has a long history of being exploited by powerful interests. From big banks to pharmaceutical companies to energy corporations, North Carolinians have seen time and again how the system is rigged against them, and now that rigging is getting worse. But we can't just blame the courts. We also have to look at the dysfunction in Congress and the Senate. People are fed up with Washington. They see a political system that doesn't work for them anymore. They see career politicians who are more interested in accumulating power than in solving problems. And they're desperate for something different. That's where Cooper's experience becomes such a powerful argument. He's been in North Carolina politics for decades. He's served in the state legislature. He's been attorney general. He's governed as governor. He's also spent 18 years in private practice, handling real cases for real people. That's a breadth of experience that's rare in Washington, where most people have spent their entire careers bouncing between campaign positions and congressional staff jobs. And here's what he's offering that's genuinely different. He wants to bring what he calls North Carolina common sense to Washington. That doesn't mean being a partisan warrior. It means being pragmatic. It means focusing on results instead of ideology. It means finding solutions that actually work rather than just scoring political points. He's got a plan that addresses the issues that are actually keeping people up at night. Healthcare costs have been skyrocketing, and Cooper wants to shore up the healthcare system by providing tax credits that keep insurance affordable for working families. Trade and tariffs have been a disaster for North Carolina farmers, and Cooper wants the Senate to reassert its constitutional authority over trade policy, instead of leaving it to a president who clearly doesn't understand how his decisions are affecting working people. And then there's the war that's been devastating so many families. People in North Carolina were already struggling with high utility costs and groceries and childcare and healthcare. Then the president got us into a war that made the price of gas and diesel skyrocket. That's not just bad foreign policy, that's bad economic policy that hurts real people. The frustration with Washington right now is palpable. People are angry, and they have every right to be. They've been promised solutions and delivered chaos. They've been promised leadership and delivered dysfunction. They've been promised stability and delivered constant upheaval. And what they really want is change. There's something else happening in this North Carolina race that deserves serious attention, and it's been getting far too little coverage from the mainstream media. The court's ruling on mail-in voting that came down today is going to have enormous implications for the election, and it's not the kind of thing you can afford to ignore. This is going to affect every single Senate race in the country, but it's particularly important in swing states like North Carolina. Let me be very clear about what this ruling means. Donald Trump wanted to throw out mail-in votes that arrive a couple days after Election Day, even if they were clearly marked and postmarked before Election Day. His argument was that mail-in ballots should have to be in by Election Day, and if they come in late, they should be discarded. But here's the thing, if a ballot is postmarked on Election Day or before, and it only arrives late because of postal delays that are completely outside the voter's control, why should that voter's voice be silenced? That's not democracy, that's voter suppression. The reality is that before COVID, mail-in voting was actually used more heavily by certain demographics that tend to lean conservative. Older voters, military voters, and others who are more likely to vote Republican have historically used mail-in voting at higher rates than the general population. But something shifted during the pandemic. Mail-in voting became more popular across the board, and now it's being seen as something that leans more democratic. And so Trump, seeing his political advantage slipping away, decided he wanted to disenfranchise mail-in voters entirely. But he lost that fight in court, and the implications are enormous. In a close election, those late-arriving mail ballots can make all the difference. They can flip a Senate race, they can determine control of the House, they can even decide the presidency. And the fact that Trump was trying to prevent those ballots from being counted tells you everything you need to know about his commitment to democracy. It's not a coincidence that Trump is freaking out about this. The Democrats have been scoring significant victories in places like North Carolina, and the polling suggests this Senate seat is in serious jeopardy for Republicans. The kind of ground game that Democrats have been building, despite the challenges, is starting to pay off. And the gerrymandering efforts that Trump and his allies have been pushing have also hit some roadblocks. There was a particularly interesting case in South Carolina where Democrats weren't losing one of their long-held seats, which was a bit of a surprise considering how aggressively Republicans have been trying to redistribute districts. And in North Carolina, the momentum is clearly with the Democrats. The energy is on their side. The enthusiasm is with them. And that's something that can't be manufactured or purchased, no matter how much outside spending the Republicans throw at the race. Jim Clyburn's situation is a perfect example of what's happening here. There was an effort to gerrymander him out of his seat, to redraw the district lines so he couldn't possibly win. It was blatant partisan hackery, the kind of thing that makes people cynical about politics and disgusted with both parties. But the Republicans in his state actually resisted that effort. They pushed back against the blatant power grab. And that's a sign that at least some Republicans are recognizing the danger of what their party has become under Trump. The resistance to Trump's authoritarian tendencies is growing, even within his own party. People are starting to see the pattern. They're starting to recognize that he's not interested in democracy. He's interested in power. He's not interested in representing the people. He's interested in controlling them. He's not interested in serving the public good. He's interested in serving himself and his wealthy backers. Congressman James Clyburn delivered a powerful warning that everyone needs to hear. He talked about how Democrats have allowed people to demonize the basic work of getting voters to the polls. You can have all the TV ads and radio ads and mailers and cards in the world. You can write as many letters as you possibly can. But if you don't have the boots on the ground mechanisms to get people to the polls, you're going to pay for it dearly. And the truth is, Democrats haven't done enough in recent years. In the last presidential election, we saw it in Pennsylvania and Michigan and other crucial states. The ground game wasn't there, the organization wasn't strong enough, and those losses have been haunting Democrats ever since. People like Mr. Hamilton, who just want to be able to afford their prescription drugs, who want to be able to afford housing, who want to be able to send their children to college, they want to vote for Democrats, they want to elect leaders who will fight for them, but if we don't help them get to the polls, they can't make their voices heard. Clyburn was direct about who needs to hear this message. He said he's talking to the whole team, the Democratic National Committee, the House and Senate leaders, everyone who has a stake in winning elections. Because politics isn't about individualism. It's a team sport, and everyone has to be pulling in the same direction if we're going to win. He also pointed out something that needs to be said more often. We've demonized the kind of grassroots politicking that actually works. You know, who might be the best organizer you can hire? A retired maintenance worker living on Social Security who knows his community, who can drive the church van on election day, who can organize high school and college students to knock on doors and talk to their neighbors. People have called that walk-around money, as if it's something corrupt. But that's not corruption. That's using the skills that real people have. Meanwhile, nobody seems to care about the consultants sitting in air-conditioned offices getting 15 or 20% kickbacks on the TV ads they place. The consequences of all this are hitting right now. Every close race that Trump was going to try to pilfer by denying late arriving ballots that were postmarked on or before Election Day, those are races that Democrats can win today, not just in November. The court's decision protects the integrity of those votes. It ensures that every voice can be heard. North Carolina is at the center of all this. If Democrats can't win here, they can't flip the Senate. And if they can't flip the Senate, there's no check on the chaos in Washington. There's no way to stop the madness. There's no way to protect the people who are getting crushed by the current administration's policies. But if Cooper can pull this off, if he can break the 40-year curse and flip this seat, everything changes. The balance of power shifts. The constitutional authorities that have been trampled can be restored. The regulatory bodies can be protected. The chaos can be reined in. And ordinary people might finally get the government they deserve. The choice in North Carolina is stark. On one side, you have Michael Whatley, who cheered every policy that hurt working families, who stood with the billionaires and the corporations while ordinary people struggled. On the other side, you have Roy Cooper, who has spent his career fighting for the people of his state, who understands their struggles because he's lived them alongside them, who has a plan that might actually make a difference in their lives. This election is about more than North Carolina. It's about the future of American democracy. It's about whether we're going to have a government that works for the powerful or a government that works for everyone. It's about whether we're going to have checks and balances or whether we're going to have a president who can do whatever he wants without anyone stopping him. The stakes could not be higher. The moment could not be more urgent. And the people of North Carolina have an opportunity right now to change the course of history.